Hey guys, it's Katie again. I'm here today with your lesson. So, here's a warning. Katie's giving the lesson. Um, you guys heard me this Wednesday, if you were in the Zoom session, talk about my new location. This is my contemplation corner. When Zach made the Easter videos last week, he was in his contemplation corner, as he called it, which is just this corner in our basement in front of a black couch with no decoration, no cozy spot to sit. He just sits on the floor with his books all around him. I'm officially declaring Contemplation Corner war because this is my contemplation corner and it's way cooler. Look, I've got flowers and halo lights and drapes all around me. So, I don't know, you guys. I think my corner's cooler. But anyway, on to the lesson. So, we have been talking a lot in the past couple weeks about things like fear and shame and how those relate to shining your light and showing the love of God to others. So when we were talking about these topics, we were doing a lot of like self-reflection and figuring out what in our life causes shame and fear and how we can kind of break down those things and get rid of that shame and fear so that we can shine God's light in the best way. And this is a really important thing to talk about, but it's also important for us when we are puzzling these things out and trying to figure out what shame and fear mean to us and how they relate to our lives. It's important that we take it back to God and we talk to him about it and we try to ask him to help us understand it all. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. And we're taking a little return back to the inner circle. If you guys remember that diagram Blythe showed at the very beginning of the Shining Your Light lessons, you know that there's all these different circles relating to shining your light. And the inner circle is your relationship with God because it's your foundation for shining your light. It's where you get your light. And if that relationship isn't right and isn't strong, then your light's not going to be shining in the best way. It might be hidden under a bushel or, it might just be fractured. So we're going to return to that because it's such an important topic. So you guys know I've talked before about having a hardened heart. And when I was thinking about what I was going to do for this lesson, what I was going to talk about relating to this inner circle, I really just had a lot to think about with a hardened heart. I've had a hardened heart at times. I'm sure you guys have had one too. And when we discussed this before, we basically came to the conclusion that a hardened heart is one that doesn't understand and doesn't want to understand. So it blocks itself off from understanding and from learning. And this is a really dangerous thing. So there's lots of verses in the Bible that talk about understanding and knowledge and how that relates to having a hardened heart. I'm going to tell you guys right now, we're not going to read the whole chapter of Proverbs 14 here, but I recommend that you either pause this video now, or after you watch the video, go read Proverbs 14 because there's just so much in there about knowledge, understanding, and a hardened heart. But we're going to look at some other verses that paint a pretty good picture of it. Hey, this is me stepping in as I'm editing this video just to let you know I didn't include anything from Proverbs 14 because the whole chapter is just so related to the topic and it was going to take a lot of extra time. But I do think it would be great for you guys to read it and just maybe do some contemplation on your own about everything that Proverbs 14 means. And we might be able to fit it into our discussion on Wednesday. So we're going to start in Proverbs 9, Proverbs 9, verses 4 through 6. Whoever is simple, let him turn in here. As for him who lacks understanding, she says to him, come eat of my bread, and drink of the wine I have mixed. Forsake foolishness and live, and go in the way of understanding. So, we see that these are all really important things, but how do we get knowledge and understanding? We know we can never understand everything. The Bible says that clearly in many different places. But we're going to keep reading in Proverbs 9 to get some ideas here. Picking up back in verse 7. He who corrects a scoffer gets shame for himself, but he who rebukes a wicked man only harms himself. Do not correct a scoffer lest he hate you. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love you. Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be still wiser. Teach a just man, and he will increase in learning. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. So I want to stop here to make a quick distinction. This does mention both shame and fear. It says someone who tries to correct a scoffer will bring shame. And that's getting right back to a hardened heart. A scoffer, as they're talking about it here, is a person who is rejecting understanding purposefully. They're not wanting to be open to receiving it. And fear of the Lord is different from a fear based in worry or anxiety. Fear of the Lord is when you understand the Lord, you understand his power. So, understanding and knowledge, to get those, you need to allow yourself to be instructed. You know, it says here, teach a wise man, give instruction to a wise man, and he'll be still wiser. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love you. So this is telling us that for us to gain knowledge and understanding, we need to be open to being taught so that we can learn, so we can understand. So this is just connecting all back to the idea of softening your heart, allowing yourself to want to be taught and corrected. So now we're going to move into the New Testament. We're going to go to Mark chapter 9. And there's an interesting story in here that I think teaches us a lot about understanding and knowledge and what Jesus has to say about it. So a little bit of background, we're not starting right at the beginning of the chapter. Basically, there's this man who brings his son to Jesus, and his son is afflicted with a demon. And the disciples tried to banish it from him, but they couldn't. So they're bringing him to Jesus now. Starting Mark chapter 9, verse 20. Then they brought him, the son, to Jesus. And when he saw him, immediately the spirit convulsed him, and he fell on the ground and wallowed, foaming at the mouth. So Jesus asked his father, "How long has this been happening to him?" And he said, "From childhood. And often he has thrown him both into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us." Jesus said to him, "If you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes." Immediately the father of the child cried out and said with tears, "Lord, I believe, help my unbelief." When Jesus saw that the people came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, "Deaf and dumb spirit, I command you, come out of him and enter him no more." Then the spirit cried out, convulsed him greatly, and came out of him. And he became as one dead, so that many said, "He is dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. And when he had come into the house, his disciples asked him privately, "Why could we not cast it out?" So he said to them, "This kind can come out by nothing but prayer and fasting." Then they departed from there and passed through Galilee, and he did not want anyone to know it. For he taught his disciples and said to them, "The Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of men, and they will kill him. And after he is killed, he will rise the third day." But they did not understand the saying and were afraid to ask him. Yes, I do have pineapple water bottle, just so you guys know. Okay, so this is kind of an interesting story. We see Jesus take a lot of demons out of a lot of people, but this one's a little different. So we can learn a few things from this. First, in verse 23, Jesus says, "If you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes." If this, relating to giving us knowledge and understanding, if we believe that God can give us knowledge and understanding, and if we soften our hearts to allow for it, he will, and he can, because it says, if you believe, all things are possible to him who believes. Second point, starting in verse 26, then the spirit cried out, convulsed him greatly, and came out of him. And he became as one dead, so that many said, "He is dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. This part, when I first read this, it hit me so strongly, because Jesus has released his spirit from this little boy, and he's kind of just like laying there still. So everyone immediately assumes, oh yeah, he's dead. He's done for. And Jesus is kind of like, whoa, hold up just a second. He just grabs the kid's hand and lifts him up. So this, I think, is a beautiful representation that we don't understand everything. We don't know everything. And there are some times when we assume things, and Jesus has to come in and say, no. Don't assume that. Here's the truth. And this relates to the super popular verse, Proverbs 3:5. I'm sure you guys all know it, but I'm going to flip to it anyway. I didn't have this verse pre-marked here. Sorry, guys. Okay, so Proverbs 3:5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. So you guys know this verse. Jesus is doing this right here. Like, we from everyone else's understanding, the little boy is dead. But Jesus says, no, he's alive. All right, so now on to the third point we get from this passage. Continuing from where we just left off, verse 28. And then he had come into the house, and his disciples asked him privately, why could we not cast it out? So he said to them, this kind can come out by nothing but prayer and fasting. So this shows us that the disciples, they made a mistake. They didn't understand. And they asked Jesus for understanding, and he gave them the answer. I mean, that's the simplest way to say what's happened here. So they didn't know what to do. They didn't know how they'd messed up. They asked Jesus, and he said, oh, well, you had to pray and fast to get rid of this demon, right? So when we go to Jesus and when we ask him, he'll show us. He'll give us understanding if we believe that he will. All right, so now this is super important for the next part of the story, because in this part, the disciples didn't understand. They asked Jesus. But in the next part, they're going to do something a little different. So from verses 30 to 32, when they departed from there and passed through Galilee, he did not want anyone to know it, for he taught his disciples and said to them, the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of men, and they will kill him, and after he is killed, he will rise the third day. But they did not understand the saying and were afraid to ask him. This is just the big downfall of this story. This like the saddest part of the story, because the disciples have just had something they didn't understand, how to cast out the demon. They asked Jesus for the answer, and he gave it to them. And now, in this part, Jesus is saying to him exactly what's going to happen in very clear terms. They didn't understand, and they were afraid to go to him and ask him about it. And the saddest part about this, they won't understand this until Jesus is risen and until he proves to them that he's not a ghost. It takes a long time for them to understand this, and to me it's very clear it's because they have partially hardened their hearts. Things that they see evidence for, like the little boy raising up, they asked Jesus for understanding then. But things that are in the future that they don't see any evidence of, they're afraid to ask Jesus. So Jesus will answer your questions, you guys. That's what all of this is proving. You go to him, you ask him, you believe he'll answer, he will answer. Maybe not right away, maybe in a confusing way, but he will answer. He gives us opportunities to ask. So he is saying this whole thing to the disciples. He's giving them the opportunity to ask him questions about it, and they don't. So look for those opportunities and use them. Okay, so one thing that I have learned pretty recently, something I haven't been doing for a long time, a great way to gain understanding, to puzzle things out in your head and then take them back to God, is meditation. And I'm not talking about like, honestly, when you make that noise, meditation is really hard, not gonna lie. So real meditation is a process of ponder, picture, pray. The 3 P's, it's super easy. So when you ponder, you're really thinking about something. So when you read a truth in the Bible and you don't understand it, you think about it. So that's the first step. You just think about it. Think about all that it encompasses. Think about what the words mean. Then you picture. You picture yourself in this situation. Picture how this truth could be applied to your life or what it would change in your life. And so you see yourself in this situation. It helps you understand it more. And then the last step, pray, is super important. You take it to God and you say, God, here's what I've puzzled out. Show me the rest, or give me understanding, or help me apply this picture to my life. Help me make this picture that I've just imagined in my head a truth. And this is a really great example of the verse Jeremiah chapter 33, verse 3. Again, I didn't have this marked. So it says, call to me and I will answer you, and I will show you great and mighty things that you do not know. So this is God showing us how to gain understanding. We puzzle it out, we figure out as much as we can on our own, but then we don't stop there. Then we take it to God and we ask him to help us apply it or to help reveal the rest to us. So guys, I just want to remind you that strengthening this inner circle with God is so, so important. And gaining understanding and knowledge from him is going to make your light shine brighter, and it's going to help you be more confident to actually be able to shine your light and feel like maybe you can answer questions that you're scared you don't know the answers to, because he's going to give you understanding and he's going to tell you what to do in those situations. and it's just going to allow your light to be blinding. So don't let your hearts be hardened, guys. Open them up to instructing and teaching. Go to God with your questions. Don't be afraid to ask him, because he wants you to know. He wants to give you knowledge. He wants you to come to him with those questions. And he wants you to shine your light the brightest you possibly can. So that's it, you guys. I really hope you enjoyed that lesson. I can't wait to discuss it with you on Wednesday. I'm going to come up with some challenging questions, so be ready. All right, shine your light, you guys. I love you, and I'll see you later.